The Why Me Project, an exclusive presentation of Faith Strong Today.
I say, I mean, maybe it's because we've been in radio for so long, Holly. There's somewhat of you feel at home. I mean, we talk to athletes and we talk to authors, but when you talk to an artist about music and life, I feel like that's our little sweet spot.
Yes, and that's why we love the podcast, because we get to dive a little deeper. It's not just, hi, who are you? What's your music? Do you like frogs? Like, we can actually talk about more serious things, and this is why we do what we do. Hopefully today encourages you.
Teaming up with integrity, something that we've loved to do over the last year. We're hoping that it's going to continue. We'll just keep asking for people, and they'll keep saying, here, talk to this person. Taylor Leonhardt, how are you?
I'm doing great.
We like to ask the skill testing question because we never know where it's going to go. And that is, who are you and where did you come from?
Okay, who am I and where did I come from? Well, you could take that a lot of directions, but the simplest way of answering would be I'm Taylor Leonhardt. I am an artist and a singer-songwriter in Nashville, Tennessee, but I was born and originally grew up in South Texas. Ooh. And those were where I spent my formative years. And I also lived a very long time, about a decade, in North Carolina before I got to Nashville. So I feel I kind of describe myself sometimes like, oh, I'm equal parts Texan and North Carolinian, and then finding myself in this kind of new place for me. Like it's been about 3 years here in Nashville.
What is with phenomenal worship artists coming from Texas?
Good call. Yeah.
Well, everything is better in Texas. I don't know if you've heard that.
We have.
No, I'm kidding. I can't even say it without laughing because of how ridiculous that is. But it's a special place. There's no doubt. And I guess there are a lot of talented folks in Texas. I think there's a lot of really great, my guess is, this is true of anywhere, but I can speak of what I know. There are a lot of great churches in Texas, and there's a lot of, I think people probably being brought up and given opportunities in some special places. And you're in the Bible Belt where there's there's room for that sort of thing.
Faith and football.
Family, faith, football, all the F's. Yeah. So.
Yeah. I mean, saying that there's a lot of great churches in Texas would lead us to believe that faith has been a big part of your life from the beginning. Were you that child who was also always singing, maybe a church choir? What was it like growing up in Texas?
I grew up in a little church, liturgical. So just, singing hymns from a hymnal, the same older man playing behind the organ every Sunday. Mm-hmm. And, every year he got older and the hymns kind of got slower and slower, literally. But I love singing. And it was at church, of course, that I even discovered I could sing. I think I always did. I have lots of memories of enjoying singing as a kid and putting on, as many of us did growing up, like, subjecting our, having sleepovers and subjecting our parents to like some sort of production.
Yes.
Charging admission. You would just like come up with a play, some sort of song and dance. And then you would have all the adults in the house like sit down in the living room while you put on this. It's like, it's not optional. So I was very much like that kid doing that sort of thing, but maybe I was in middle school singing in church. And I think it was one of those things where a person in the pew in front of me turned around and was like, Taylor, you have a nice voice. You should think about being in the choir. And so that was the first time I can remember someone actually making a comment about my voice. And so then I thought, oh, that's interesting. And so I joined church choir, and I also joined like the choir in my just middle school and high school. And that is really where I sort of figured out like, oh, this is something I can do. And maybe even I so wanted to be an athlete, but I wasn't excelling as an athlete, but I was kind of getting a little more traction in the music world as a kid. So
when was the realization then that you would make this more of a career thing? Like this wasn't just I'll sing on Sundays, but that you could actually, from Texas to North Carolina to Nashville, like we're like, oh my goodness, actually, I have a talent and other people want to hear me.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because a lot of my friends here in Nashville maybe went to music school. They went to a college for music. They have known for a long time, this is what I wanted to do. And I just didn't have that. I mean, I loved it. It was really fun for me. It was a hobby, and I learned guitar also in middle school. We moved towns, and I needed something to do with my time because I didn't know anyone. And so my dad had his guitar from college. He kind of taught me a couple chords, and then I taught myself. That was the advent of, there wasn't YouTube yet, but there was, I had my CD player, and then there was Ultimate Guitar, the website. And so I just, with those two things, with my CD player and Ultimate Guitar Archive or whatever.com, I just figured it out. And, and so it was just kind of that. And then I think maybe somewhere in high school, I started going to, a Vineyard church, if you're familiar, with a Vineyard church. And they let me be on the worship team, in the band. And, there were a couple little churches in our town like that I, after I sort of really got serious about my faith in high school, I started kind of doing that and helping out. So there are these adults in my life I remember who were leading these kind of worship teams. And just sort of, I think, number one, they just gave me the opportunity, right? And they gave me, and I didn't really know. I guess they were mentoring me or discipling me or whatever word you would kind of choose to use there, but that's certainly what they were doing. And I think it's cool now as an adult to sort of realize you can do that for a kid just give them some time and attention and some space and find out what they like. There are a lot of adults in my life like that. And, one fun story is there was a church I was playing for my junior year of high school, and the worship leader was this woman named Renee. And that was the first time I ever worked for a woman leading worship in a church. And she passed me a Sandra McCracken album. And I have never been the same still since then. And just remember being we played her song, My Mercy, My God, on a Sunday morning. And I didn't know Christian music could sound like that. I didn't know, because, I just didn't. And I was oh, there's something compelling about this to me. It kind of sounds like the folk Americana music that I had been discovering. And so it's just the full circle moments now getting to work with an artist like Sandra, who I really have been listening to since my very first day of kind of doing music. But to answer your question, I didn't see that as a career path for me. In fact, I went to college, studied psychology. I thought I would probably end up maybe in the mental health care field or something like that, or social work. I was drawn to working with youth and that kind of stuff. But as sort of it worked out, I graduated at a time when I couldn't find a job. It didn't make sense to go to grad school. I ended up back in my hometown working for a church, leading music. And I don't think that I had even thought about that you could do this as a job, As a kid, I did it. I just volunteered. And then I found out, it turns out there are, you can be a part of a church community in this way, and you can actually do this kind of vocationally. And it always was more it wasn't I set out to do that. It was kind of I found myself in situations where I was a part of a community that needed someone. And then I had maybe the skill, or at least the potential that they were looking for. And then they gave me a chance. And so music for me, and all the meanwhile I'm writing songs, I'm kind of discovering my own voice, that I have things to say. And then I kind of just go I think this is what I want to give my life to. At the time, I was like, I had taken the GRE. I was maybe going to go to grad school. I was going to be a teacher. I was going to do all these things like a lot of people in my generation, we really wanted to, like, I'm using air quotes, like, find the thing that God wants me to do. Like, what's that thing?
The calling.
What's the calling? What's my purpose? And I had put I was so stressed about figuring out what that thing was that I never really stopped to think that what I'd been doing all the meanwhile with all my spare time was maybe a part of that, at least was a part of what God was. If he wasn't, I'm not sure if it's like that, this is my one purpose on the earth, but I do think it's the invitation that God has kept extending to me, which is like, you have something to say, you have songs to write, and the invitation is to share those. And he keeps giving me places and opportunities to do that. And it's kind of been more like one little yes after another until all of a sudden I realized, I think I'm doing music I think I'm doing it as my job. Yeah. Like somehow that happened almost on accident, but
yeah,
of course we know it wasn't an accident, but it can feel that way sometimes, more like something I stumbled into versus something I really tried to pursue.
Yeah. You just said yes along the way, which is really cool.
Yeah. And I'm sure there might be some people listening who are maybe songwriters starting out, or maybe you're in a band, and you do say a lot of yeses in the beginning. And some of those, you kind of realize like, well, yeah, you kind of learn like some of the yeses aren't all good, or you kind of go like, well, I said yes to that thing, and that actually maybe wasn't exactly, but I think it's all a learning experience, and you kind of get better at figuring out, hey, this is the thing, this is my thing, and this is not my thing. And,
yeah,
it's so rarely that there's one path for you, and God has hidden it like a puzzle, and you've got to figure it out. And it's more like, he's given us all this freedom, and, and he's put these desires and talents and things in our heart to do. And so you do get to make a lot of choices, and you get to make some mistakes too. And you get to, it's a wandering path, at least it has been, for me, but I'm grateful.
Yeah. So you're in Dallas or Texas, sorry, and then you go to North Carolina and then to Nashville. It's quite the journey. Was this all things because your parents were moving about, or were these just areas that you got jobs and was like, this is where I need to go. This is my next yes?
Yeah, no, my family's all been in Texas. I just kind of always dreamed about doing other things, and I wanted to see what else was out there. I went to college out of state and then ended up in North Carolina. I kind of followed a camp friend out there and ended up in Raleigh, North Carolina, doing sort of like it was called the Fellows Program. It was like a year-long discipleship thing. And North Carolina ended up just being such an important place for me. It was the place that I met my bandmate, Jess Ray, who we ended up starting Mission House together. But even before we were doing Mission House, we were just friends, kind of both writing songs, both trying to be artists in a non-artist city, both trying to we're almost exactly the same age. And so when we met each other, it did sort of feel like it was one of those things where people are like, oh, have you met Jess Ray? Oh no, have you met Taylor Leonhardt? And we kind of circled each other for a while in Raleigh. And then when we met, it sort of felt like, oh yeah, like it was so encouraging to both of us to finally have a friend who was maybe trying to figure out the same stuff at the same time. And we end up starting this, with our other friends, we start this really beautiful, vibrant young adult sort of worship night thing. And then we start writing songs for that. I mean, again, just like the theme of, we just said yes to these little things, and those kind of turned into, we didn't do that seeking to become Mission House, or we never thought, oh, we'll have this worship night and then we'll be then we'll be worship artists. But we started writing songs for this very specific group of people. And then our friend who started working for Integrity, in Nashville, asks us like, hey, you guys got any worship songs? I'm like, and then we were like, well, we have these like ones that we wrote, but you're probably not interested in those. And then it turns out he was. And so then all of a sudden we realized like, oh, maybe more people, like these songs might be for more people than just our 75 folks or so that are getting together on a Monday night. And so, yeah, it's kind of been, North Carolina was this time of really deep community of learning how to write music, of learning, of kind of learning how to be a Christian and how to follow Jesus after college, like after all of those sort of supports of, I'm in this campus ministry. I'm like, you kind of get thrown to the wolves and you're just in the world and trying to figure it out. And it's a hard thing. Mm-hmm. And so it was a really formative time in my life because I was in North Carolina from basically like age 22, 23 to 32, 33. And just that time in my life, getting to be surrounded by people who also wanted to follow Jesus, people who wanted to be creative and make space for that. I know that formed me in such a deep way. And so, it was a hard thing to leave, North Carolina, but ultimately, like I said, another yes a couple of years ago of just going, I think I'd like to maybe try, I was meeting all these people in Nashville who were writing songs together. I'm realizing what a community, coming from North Carolina where there's not a lot of people maybe writing songs and a lot of people ask you what you do for work. And then you don't really understand what your job is as an artist, to then move into a city where so many of my friends now have the same job as I do. And, it's, it comes with other things, but it has just been such a gift to be here and to learn from people who I've been listening to for years, to that for me, it was, I think it's songwriting that I love the most. That's the part of the creative process that I enjoy more than anything. And so it's like, I want to spend some time in a songwriting city, and I want to just be in the room with folks and learn from them and contribute in the way that I can. Not that Nashville really needs me, but it certainly is a very hospitable town, and it's been wonderful to be here.
Nice.
It's interesting though, because I would have thought maybe, are you an artist who's the lead worship artist of a church? Cause that's a thing. Or does Taylor become a solo artist? Because that could be a thing. But instead, you guys create Mission House. You have a new album, which was released last week. What's interesting about it though, is that you're two females in a duo, which is also, you don't see that a lot in Christian music. Yeah.
Yes. It's funny. I was just talking to someone about this. Like, if you look at the demographics of most people listening to the radio, like that demographic tends to be older. Those songs that are just like need to be there and the radio like certainly serves a really beautiful purpose. And then what we found, and we just found this in our community in Raleigh, North Carolina, was like, well, there are a lot of young people who had never turned Christian radio on, or they're not going to listen to that kind of stuff. They want to listen to Jesus music because they have a faith, or at least they have an interest in Jesus, but they're not going to they're not going to listen to this thing that in the form that it exists right now. And so they're looking for a different expression and something that more reflects maybe the music that they already like and these other genres and stuff like that. And Jess and I we both are solo artists. So what's unique about Mission House is, you can go listen to Jess Ray album. She just put out an album in the last year called Born Again. That's amazing. You can listen to a Taylor Leonhardt album. And those are going to be two different experiences. And then we kind of come together and make this Mission House thing. I think we even though we try to make those have a different heart and a different purpose, those Mission House songs, but, they're inadvertently kind of informed by our solo artistry as well. And the things that we listen to, which could be anything from, Jess and I, our favorite band is The Killers, or, and we love listening to like old country, like, or especially me, like Johnny Cash, or, and I think you hear, I think especially in some of these like things, like what we love about this Family Nights project, and was that we were like, well, we want it to sound like the people who are in the room. And so it was really fun. And our artist friends who are in Texas. And so it was fun to invite folks like Antoine and Aaron and our friend Dee, Wilson into that, and just to go like, the Mission House does have a sound. And then I do think also there's some flexibility in it, and that we always want there to be room for the sound to, kind of reflect who's with us there at the time. So Mission House is me and Jess, but we've always seen it as this like open door thing where we would hope that it would be very collaborative. And so these family night projects, of which like Dallas, All Your Heart is like the first one. It's been really fun just to experiment with that form and to go like, oh yeah, we can make things that sound a lot of different ways. And, it's sort of fun. It's like a playground a little bit.
Do you ever feel like as two women who are leading worship that there isn't the same kind of space available? I mean, just growing up in the early 80s, it was so rare to see a female leading worship, and now it's more common. Kind of being in that vein, what's that transition been for you and for Jess, just taking a look at the landscape and who's leading worship?
Even in the story I told earlier about that woman in my high school praise team, Renee, like that was so impactful for me as a kid to see a woman in leadership in a church. And I'm with you. I think the examples were fewer and far between, even in the 90s, early 2000s. And then, when I would have been young, and, I think Jess and I are fortunate that we, have definitely, I don't know that it's necessarily felt like a fight or that we've had to fight for a spot, but certainly I think that it's not lost on us that is a big deal for people. And I'm just so glad to see that it feels like the church, the greater church, kind of capital C church, is really starting to, a lot of churches they've had women in leadership for a long time. And then I think that there are other places that seem to be, engaging in conversation, coming around, making more space for women to have leadership positions that aren't just the children's director. And that is definitely something, that's really important to us, just to go like, we want, there's a young high school girl that I'm friends with in my neighborhood. And it's like, I want her to think like, oh, I could serve God in any way he would call me to. Like, there's not like a certain place where I'm kind of allowed to be in the corner. And I think about, so we, I don't know that we always like walk around thinking like, okay, well, we're representing all of womankind up here in our female duo. But I do think that maybe what feels really beautiful is like that more and more women's voices I think we're getting to hear from more and more women's voices these days. And, we're so happy to be a part of that conversation. And we didn't start it, and we won't be the last ones, either, but just to go like, I think women have a specific, to use this phrase, like, I think women have a specific prophetic gift for the church. And that we reflect a part of who God is. And so, we love getting to do our part in that.
Yeah. leading up to album being released and you guys working on an album and that, is there nervousness? Is there excitement for it to be released? Because it seems like you only, here's a new song on the socials. We don't get to hear everything. And then finally it gets to be out and then everybody's allowed to hear it. So how do you feel when it leads up to release of album?
Well, you know what's so interesting is that it's like you record something, and this particular project, the actual night, it was recorded live in Dallas, and that's definitely a character in it. You're going to hear a lot of voices. It has a very sing-along feel, and we were, the band itself was stripped down. It's like it's me and Jess and Dee. There's some guests in there, but really the main character is like the people in the room who showed up singing. We taught them some choir parts on some of the songs. So it's not just like, oh, here we go, another worship record. It's like, it really feels like, those friends in Dallas showed up and became that other band member. And so we'll never make anything just like that
ever
again. It just like we captured a moment in time. So what's interesting is that was in February 2023. So, getting ready to release it, in between, like we've done several things since then and we've worked on other projects. And so there isn't a sense in which you get further and further away. And, I think it's really cool. And I love that we've been gearing up for this release because I've been watching, you're getting videos ready to share and you're doing all this stuff and you're sort of immersing yourself in the night again. And I'm listening to these songs going, especially this one that we just shared with the release, which is called Seek and Find. I don't know if we've ever been so excited to share a song because, it was so fun to remember what happened in the room when we sang that song. It was one of those holy thin place moments where it just, you don't always get that you can't plan those. You can't produce them. You can't organize them. Yeah. It just is what happens when you show up and God, who is there in the mysterious way that he does, like breathes sometimes on these little fires that you build. And, we felt that, especially, during that song. And I think what that song even communicates is probably at the core of what Jess and I are trying to always say, which is like, for us, it's still Jesus. And even with all the things going on in the world and all of the just like suffering and the things that could make a person maybe want to walk away from their faith. Mm-hmm. We find in Jesus someone that is as compelling as ever, as beautiful as ever. He's still worth looking for, and still worth all of this. And so I think that moment in singing that song with our friends, just this affirmation of really our faith and really like what this is all about for us was just so special. So the release, I don't know if we felt nervous as much as it's just been kind of like, okay, we're just happy to share that. And I just hope, maybe if there's a hope, it's like, I hope that this thing that happened on this random night in February, I hope that can, that people can feel that and can engage with that in their own way. And, just that the door to that space is able to open up and people can come in and join us on these new songs. So,
this is the Why Me Project podcast. So I'm going to ask you the second skill testing question about a why me moment that you've experienced, whether it was in a valley or a mountaintop of life. And you just said, why me?
Oh man, I have been thinking about this question and
we get that a lot.
Yeah.
Unsure of which direction to go. And I was sort of sitting here going like, man, do I want to, I'll just be honest. It's like, I'm feeling prompted to talk about this one thing. And I'm sort of like, are you sure that you want to do this on?
We're here for you.
Yeah.
But I think that I think maybe I'm going to, because I think that I just have a feeling like maybe there's a person who might just need someone to hear someone else say like, hey, I can relate to this. But I think a really hard thing, especially living in the South in the United States, is to be, so I turned 30, I'm a 35-year-old gal, and I am still single. And that at times has been really difficult. I think that at times in the context I'm in, now this is different. If I lived in a different part of the country, sometimes I think maybe it would feel different, but to live in the South or the Southeast, to be in the church, to be like in these contexts where it's sort of like marriage and family can be very centered. Sometimes it's really hard that I still feel like, oh, I would have loved at this point to like have a family, to have started that part of my life. And for whatever reason, that has been a why me for me, that I'm sort of right in the middle of it. So it feels a little vulnerable to share, because it's not, I was like, maybe I should have shared something that's more like, well, back in the day, here was my why me, and here I'm already on the other side of it. And so I don't really have an answer for that. I think it's just a place where I'm actively going, God, this is not how I would have orchestrated. This is not how I would have written it. And God knows that by now. We have very honest talks, me and God. And, I think that it's just a place where I have to kind of, I have to open my hands so that I can receive the life that He is giving me. Even though sometimes I think I want to be in this other story. Or when a relationship hasn't worked out, I think what's wrong with me, or what, all these different things. And so if you're listening and you're just going, if that's you and you're just like, man, I would have written this differently. It's like, all I can say is I get it. And that it's just this daily opening my hands, like, okay, God, I want to live in the life that you have given me. I want to like be all the way here. And I'm just going to have to leave the rest to you. So that's what I would share. That's just kind of my day to day. I don't know why, but I also know that there's more, that I have a lot of time. I have a lot of freedom. I have a lot of me that I can give to my friends. I have amazing community. And so I know that they're like, I'm kind of actively also always trying to go like, man, I might not be in that specific story, but I definitely I'm definitely loved. I'm definitely surrounded. I definitely have been, one of our favorite verses for these family night projects, we've been using this verse that God puts the lonely in families. And even though I might not be a mom, or I might not be married, like that is true, that God has put me in a family. And I just have all different kinds of examples of that. So there you have it, guys. The Why Me podcast.
I love that. A lot of people don't talk about being single, and I'm starting to see a lot more podcasts about singleness, because I remember when I was younger and when I was single, and it's like you said, you want to be in a different story. But I also really appreciated being in that season of singleness, because I got a chance to do things I wouldn't be able to do now that I'm married with kids. Sometimes I wish I was single again. Just in this
For
sense,
sure.
So it's beautiful that you bring that up, because I think it resonates so much with so many people. And unfortunately, it feels like even the church doesn't always leave space for those who are in that phase.
Yes. And if you're married and listening to this, like, just know that, your single friends really appreciate it when you ask. You can ask, in appropriate ways about what we like it when you say, because we've sat through a lot of, Bible studies or whatever group, the friends get together, and it's like, before you know it, you've talked for an hour and a half about everyone's kids and all that stuff. And it's great, because it's like, we want to share in those things with you, but we also want you to ask us about the other things that we might be doing and thinking about. And And so I just think, yeah, it's like sometimes it just feels like there's not a lot of room for us to maybe sometimes talk about our story. Or there's not a lot of, like, the church doesn't like give a lot of airtime to that. And so, I just wanted to share that. And then it's like, I really just believe that God is making all of us into more and more into his image, right? It's like, as we follow Jesus, we become more and more like him. And that's going to happen no matter what your context. And so, even when we hear things like, which is absolutely true, like we hear people say things like around us, like, well, marriage is really refining. I believe that's 1000% true. And I would say as a single person, yeah, and being single is really refining because God will use whatever your circumstance is, to make you into, like, to bring you into this, like, who he created you to be. So I would just say, like, this is for me and for anyone else. It's like, you're right where you're supposed to be. You're not outside of that process, and you are a stone in God's river. And he, you can just trust that. You could just maybe just relax into that. That's what I would like to do more and more. It's just like, okay, that's my, I'm holding my hands open. Like, that's my thing. So
I was going to wrap this up, but now now that you're being vulnerable, I want to take this opportunity to dive into it just a little bit more. And the reason why I bring this up is because Holly and I have a really close friend, also single. She said one of her hardest things is having friends always wanting to set her up with somebody, or getting the conversation from her parents. Oh, are you dating anybody yet? Why are you single? Like, I saw there's a really cute guy at the supermarket. Yeah. I could get his number for you. How do you navigate those things? Because we are, like you said, you're involved with all of your friends, friends are married and friends are having kids. Yeah. And yet, just like, I'm kind of tired of people asking me, oh, are you dating somebody?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's just, it probably depends. Like, I think maybe it's just because I don't think there's going to be one answer fits all for this, because some people really do want to be set up. They're like, yes, friends, please, and other people are like, no, that's not, I think maybe it's just like, don't assume anything. That's probably the biggest thing. Sure. It's just like, my parents have kind of, for a long time, who doesn't really know that? Some version of like, you're going home and your family's like, well, so, how's the old, you see your cousins like the one time at Thanksgiving and they're like, so are you seeing anyone? You're like, maybe not this year, maybe so, like, just that, that's kind of the question, that can be the question. I think maybe just not assuming either way, or just going like, hey, is that something that you're interested in? Do you want us to be on the lookout for you in that way or not? Like, and maybe just having that dialogue of going like, tell us what you're, thinking of married to single people, tell us like what your experience of that is like. What do you even want? Like, and just maybe asking. I think just when someone asks me what my experience is and maybe what I'm even hoping for or wanting, like, whether or not that leads to I think the point really is then I just feel seen and known, and I feel cared about. I feel like, oh, my story and my context it has room in your life. And, but it is the number of times even, someone will come up to you at a show and go like, well, I'm just praying for, your husband. And it's like, it's really sweet. It is sweet, but it's like, there are kind of a lot of assumptions always sort of being, made. And I think, everyone, no matter what your circumstance, like everyone just wants to belong. They really do. And so I think my friends who treat me really well have made me feel like I'm a part of the family, and it's like, and their kids are sort of like my bonus nieces and nephews. And that's a two-way street. That also has I have to I show up for those things, and I'm going to go to the soccer game, and I'm going to go to the, you know, because that's what I really want is I want a life that's full of family. And so I think there's just, you know, that's where sometimes it's like, oh yeah, you have to maybe get creative too and just go like, there are a lot of, again, I never want to miss out on what God is wanting to give me, what he's already giving me, because I have this picture in my head of what it should be, or it has to be like this. So.
Yeah. From solo projects to Mission House, which is available volume 1, All Your Heart, to Paper Horses. She's a busy individual, but she took some time to hang out with myself and Holly Taylor. This has been so much fun. Thank you for sharing your heart with us.
Thanks for having me, guys. Thanks for such a meaningful conversation, and yeah, thanks for helping us spread the word about the new album. We're really excited. Hope this isn't the last time we get to hang here. So thank you, guys.
So here's what I love the most.
Okay.
When I go into this thinking we're just going to talk music and that's it, and then you find out how genuine and real and authentic somebody like Taylor is, and you care less about the music in some ways and more about the human.
Yes, I love that so much. I just appreciate her being open and vulnerable and touching on something like singleness. I don't actually think we've really talked about it much on our podcast.
No.
So that was really beautiful just to hear her perspective on it. And yeah, I mean, what will be. Anyone can take some of those little nuggets and apply them to their life. We have to hold our lives with open hands and just let God guide us accordingly. So I appreciate her words of wisdom today.
Yeah, different walks of life, different situations, single friends, married friends, friends who have kids, friends who don't, and let's just be open to all of them as to where they are and meet them where they're at.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you've got friends who you think would be encouraged by today, make sure you send them the link.
Love
that. And just say, hey, check this out. We think it's going to encourage you. That would be, that'd mean the world to us.
Yeah, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Follow us on the socials. Reply to us. You could also, when you're on Apple or Spotify, hit the star button. Give us a rate and review, 5 stars. Holly, every once in a while, gives $5.
No, not a thing.
She has yet to do it.
Not a thing.
But it's going to happen at some point. So just keep rating and reviewing, giving us 5 stars.
Also on YouTube, check us out. And of course, you can always go to faithstrongtoday.com.